Shadows of the Overlook Hotel. The Overlook Hotel had always held a reputation that hovered between whispered legend and outright terror. Nestled high in the Colorado Rockies, it had been closed for decades, ever since a series of unexplained disappearances had forced the authorities to shut it down. Tourists occasionally dared to peer through its boarded windows, snapping pictures of the snow-draped facade, but none stayed long. Some claimed they could hear faint music drifting through the wind, a piano playing alone in the cold, empty hallways. Others swore they saw shadows flicker behind the broken windows, moving with a life of their own. Emma Lawson, a young journalist with a hunger for uncovering the truth behind urban legends, didn't scare easily. When she read about the Overlook in an online forum about haunted locations, she felt a spark she hadn't experienced in months. Her editor had reluctantly allowed her to pursue a feature story, provided she stayed safe. "Don't do anything stupid," he had said. "And take a flashlight." She laughed at the simplicity of his advice, packing her camera, audio recorder, and a sturdy backpack with essentials. The road leading up to the hotel wound through dense pines and icy switchbacks. Snowflakes began to fall the moment Emma left the town at the base of the mountain, coating her windshield in a delicate frost. She stopped halfway up to admire the view. The valley below was a blanket of white, the occasional glimmer of light from the small towns like distant stars scattered across the dark landscape. Yet as beautiful as it was, an uneasy feeling prickled at the back of her mind. She shook it off, blaming it on the isolation. By the time she arrived at the Overlook, the sun had vanished completely behind the mountains. The hotel loomed before her, an enormous structure of dark stone and weathered wood, its windows black and unwelcoming. Snow crunched beneath her boots as she approached the front entrance. Every step echoed, swallowed by the cold air. Emma's breath formed clouds in front of her face, and her heartbeat quickened, not from fear, but anticipation. She pushed against the heavy doors, which groaned like they hadn't been moved in years. Inside, the air was stale, carrying the scent of damp wood and decay. Dust motes danced in the narrow beams of her flashlight. The lobby was enormous, with chandeliers hanging precariously from the ceiling, their crystals dull from years of neglect. The grand staircase rose in a sweeping curve to the upper floors, and portraits of solemn-faced men and women lined the walls, their eyes seeming to follow her movements. Emma set up her camera, testing angles and lighting. She wanted to capture the haunting atmosphere without artificial effects. Her recorder was positioned on a nearby table. She spoke aloud, narrating her own entry, partly as a log and partly to capture ambient audio. Day 1 at the Overlook Hotel. No activity yet, but the place is incredible. Her voice cracked slightly, betraying the tension she didn't want to admit. As she explored the lower floors, Emma noticed small, subtle oddities. Doors that should have been locked swung open, revealing rooms layered in dust and decay. Wallpaper peeled from the walls, curling like dry leaves. In one corner of the lobby, a piano sat silently, its keys yellowed with age. Emma approached it, running a finger over the surface. The cold touch sent a shiver up her spine. Then, faintly, a note rang out. She froze, scanning the empty room. The piano sat untouched, yet a single key sounded clearly. Her hand trembled as she pressed the key again. It made no sound. Another note followed, slightly off-key, echoing through the lobby. Emma's rational mind scrambled for explanations. A draft, an animal, the building settling. But the sequence of notes was deliberate enough that it made her stomach twist. Emma continued exploring, moving toward the upper floors. The carpeted hallways muffled her steps, the only sound her own breathing and the occasional creak of the building settling. Rooms branched off, some with doors hanging ajar, others closed tight. She paused at one doorway, peering inside. The room appeared ordinary, furnished with a rusting bed frame and broken nightstand. Yet the air felt heavier, colder, as though the space itself resisted her presence. Her flashlight flickered, momentarily plunging the hallway into darkness. A whisper brushed past her ear, soft, unintelligible, almost a sigh. She spun around, but the hall was empty. The sensation of being watched pressed against her back. She took a step forward, forcing herself to breathe normally, and noticed footprints in the thin layer of dust across the floor. They were faint but unmistakable, small, as if a child had walked there recently. Emma crouched to examine them. Her mind raced. This hotel was abandoned. No one should have been here. She followed the trail, careful not to disturb the prints, leading her to a small door at the end of the hallway. It was partially hidden behind a curtain of tattered fabric, as though someone had tried to conceal it. She hesitated, a warning instinct stirring in her chest. Yet the journalist in her overruled the fear. Pushing the door open, she found herself in a narrow stairwell descending into darkness. The air was colder here, biting at her cheeks and fingers. Her flashlight revealed walls covered in old, peeling wallpaper and scratches etched into the wood, deep, jagged marks that didn't appear natural. She stepped carefully, each footfall echoing against the confined space. At the bottom, she reached a small, windowless room. The walls were lined with shelves and objects lay scattered across the floor, old photographs, a cracked porcelain doll, and an assortment of personal items from decades past. Emma bent down, picking up a photograph. It was black and white, a family posing on the steps of the hotel, smiling. But as she studied it, she noticed something strange. In the background, a faint figure lurked near the doorway, its features blurred but unmistakably human. Her pulse raced. She set the photo down carefully and continued scanning the room. Then she saw it, writing scrawled on the wall, jagged and erratic, almost like it had been scratched by nails. "Don't look back." Emma's rational mind screamed at her to leave, but curiosity anchored her in place. She raised her camera to record the message, and as the lens focused, a cold draft swept through the room. The door behind her slammed shut with a deafening bang. She spun around, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The air felt suffocating, heavy with the weight of something unseen. Then she heard it, a child's laughter, faint and hollow, echoing off the walls. The sound didn't belong to the building, didn't belong to the past. It was present, alive, and somehow malignant. Emma stumbled backward, tripping over a loose floorboard. Her camera clattered to the ground, but the lens kept rolling, capturing her wide-eyed panic. The laughter grew louder, circling her. Shadows flickered along the walls, moving independently of any light source. The air grew icy, breath visible even through her jacket. Emma's hands shook as she reached for the door, only to find it locked. Her flashlight flickered again, and for a brief moment, the room was completely dark. When the light returned, a small figure stood at the far corner. A girl, no older than 8, her eyes dark and hollow, staring directly at Emma. Emma gasped, stepping back. The figure didn't move, didn't blink. Yet the feeling of being watched intensified, pressing against her chest like a physical force. The air vibrated with whispers, indistinct but urgent, almost chanting. She fumbled for her phone, considering calling for help, but there was no signal. The Overlook Hotel, she realized, wasn't just abandoned. It was alive, and it didn't want her there. Heart hammering, Emma remembered the writing on the wall. "Don't look back." She turned and ran, blindly, toward the staircase leading up. The child's laughter followed her, echoing through the stairwell. Dust and debris slipped underfoot, threatening to trip her. She reached the top, lungs burning, and slammed into the hallway. The air seemed lighter here, though the shadows still stretched unnaturally along the walls. Emma didn't stop running until she reached the lobby. The piano, silent before, now played a single, mournful note. She froze, listening. Then it stopped. The silence that followed was heavier than the cold, and in that silence, Emma knew she had glimpsed only a fraction of the horrors lurking within the Overlook Hotel. Gathering her courage, she whispered to herself, "I need to stay. I need to understand." And with that, she set up her camera in the lobby, determined to document the rest of the night. But as darkness settled deeper into the hotel, Emma could feel the shadows shifting around her, watching, waiting. And somewhere, deep in the building, the child's hollow eyes followed her every move. Whispers in the dark. The night deepened, and the Overlook Hotel seemed to breathe around Emma. The grand lobby, once impressive and imposing, now felt like a cage of shadows. The flickering light of her camera's LED cast dancing shapes across the walls, and each corner seemed darker than the last, as if the building itself absorbed the light. Emma huddled near the fireplace, setting up her recorder. She wanted proof, something tangible to show that what she had seen wasn't just imagination or stress. Her hands trembled as she adjusted the microphone, every creak of the old building echoing in her ears. Then, from the upper floors, came a soft, almost inaudible tapping. She froze. At first, she thought it was just loose wood or ice settling, but the rhythm was deliberate, tap, 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 like someone walking lightly in a pattern. Emma's rational mind scrambled for explanations, but deep down, she felt the same chilling certainty as before. She was not alone. Clutching her flashlight and camera, she crept toward the grand staircase. Each step-up groaned under her weight, the sound magnified in the cavernous space. At the first landing, she paused, straining to hear. The tapping continued, now joined by a faint whisper, unintelligible yet urgent. Goosebumps prickled her skin as she followed the sound, careful not to trip over the scattered debris and torn carpet. Emma reached the corridor that led to the upper rooms. The air here was colder, heavier, carrying a faint metallic scent she couldn't identify. Doorways loomed on either side, their frames warped and rotting. As she passed one, a gust of wind slammed the door behind her shut. She jumped, heart pounding, but forced herself to move forward. The corridor stretched endlessly, the shadows seemingly shifting to block her path. She paused at room 217, the room mentioned in every local tale about the hotel's dark past. Legend had it that a family staying there decades ago vanished without a trace, leaving only their belongings behind. The door was slightly ajar. Emma's hand hovered over the handle, but before she could push it open, a voice whispered her name. Emma?
She spun around.
Nothing. The corridor was empty, save for the swaying shadows cast by her flashlight. Her stomach twisted, but her curiosity outweighed her fear. She pushed open the door and stepped inside. The room was frozen in time. Furniture coated in dust, bedsheets yellowed and tattered, and the air was thick with the smell of decay. On the nightstand, a cracked photograph showed the vanished family, smiling in what now seemed like a sinister tableau. Emma's eyes were drawn to the reflection in the mirror above the dresser. For a brief second, she thought she saw movement, a figure standing behind her. But when she spun around, the room was empty. Her recorder picked up faint static, which she assumed was interference. But then, slowly, a voice emerged through the static, clearer now, pleading, "Help us." Emma's breath caught. Her rational mind fought the fear clawing at her chest. She spoke aloud, her voice shaking. "Who's there? What do you want?" The room responded with silence, then a sudden rush of cold air that blew through the cracked windows, extinguishing the candle she hadn't realized she had lit. The mirror fogged, and letters formed as if by an invisible hand. "Leave now or join us." Emma stumbled backward, her flashlight illuminating only parts of the room. Then, the child from before appeared in the corner, small and pale, eyes hollow and fixed on her. She didn't move, didn't blink. Yet the presence was undeniable. Emma's rational mind screamed at her to run, but a strange compulsion rooted her to the floor. Suddenly, the child raised a hand, pointing toward the closet. Emma's pulse raced. Against every instinct, she approached the closet, camera shaking in her hands. Inside, she found nothing but old clothing and broken furniture. Yet the air felt charged, vibrating with energy she couldn't comprehend. Then, from the back of the closet, a faint light glimmered, as though reflecting off something metallic. Emma reached in and pulled out a small, tarnished key. The moment her fingers touched it, a whisper surged in her ears. "The basement, find the truth." Her heart pounded. The hotel had become more than just a building. It was alive, guiding her, or perhaps manipulating her. She pocketed the key, knowing instinctively that it opened something critical in the bowels of the hotel. Determined to uncover the mystery, Emma descended to the basement. The stairs were steeper and narrower here, the darkness almost suffocating. She held her flashlight high, scanning the walls, which were now lined with strange symbols etched into the stone, their meaning lost to time. The air was damp, smelling of mold and rust, and she shivered as icy droplets fell from the ceiling. Handprints, as if countless children had pressed their palms into the wood over the decades. Emma's breath caught. She stepped inside, documenting everything. The whispers grew louder, overlapping into a cacophony that filled her mind with images: families trapped, shadows moving, children crying, and a darkness that consumed everything. She fell to her knees, overwhelmed. Then silence. From the shadows, a figure emerged, a man, tall and indistinct, features obscured but eyes glowing faintly. He spoke in a voice that resonated with authority and menace. "You shouldn't have come here." Emma's heart raced. She raised her camera, hoping to record evidence, but the figure didn't move. He seemed to exist partially out of the physical world, more shadow than substance. "Why are you here?" she whispered, trembling. The figure's lips barely moved, yet the voice in her mind was clear. "To see what should never be seen. Now you belong to the Overlook." Emma stumbled backward, fear finally breaking through her resolve. She bolted for the basement stairs, the whispers chasing her, twisting into distorted voices of children and adults screaming for release. She reached the lobby, breathless and panicked. The piano began playing again, notes discordant and mournful, echoing through the empty halls. She knew one thing with absolute certainty: the Overlook Hotel was far more than haunted. It was a trap, a living entity feeding on the fear of those who dared to uncover its secrets. And she had been marked. Escape from the Overlook. Emma's lungs burned and her heart pounded as she ran through the Overlook Hotel. The grand lobby, once imposing, now seemed like a twisted labyrinth of shadows, stretching and contorting to block her path. The piano's mournful notes echoed through the halls, each discordant chord slicing through the tense silence. Her camera bounced against her chest, capturing every fleeting shadow, every shifting shape. But the recordings didn't matter now, survival did. Emma had glimpsed the truth. The hotel was alive, feeding on fear, and it wouldn't let her leave without a fight. The corridors shifted around her as if the building were breathing, elongating hallways and closing doors to trap her. The whispers returned, louder this time, a chorus of voices, children pleading, adults warning, all blending into a deafening roar. The child with hollow eyes appeared ahead, silently guiding her, pointing toward the main exit. It was unclear whether the figure wanted to help or lure her further into the hotel's grip. Emma clutched the key she had found in the basement, remembering the voice that had said, "The basement, find the truth." The meaning finally clicked. This key might be her only chance. She needed to reach the basement again, where the hotel's secrets seemed concentrated, perhaps vulnerable. She darted down the stairwell, each step slippery with ice and dust. Shadows stretched across the walls like living fingers, reaching for her. At the bottom, the heavy door loomed. Taking a deep breath, she unlocked it and entered the chamber once more. The basement was chaotic, filled with the remnants of countless decades, photographs, newspaper clippings, and eerie handprints pressed into the floorboards. But now, the energy in the room felt alive, tangible, almost pulsing. Emma realized that this was the hotel's core, the heart of its malevolence. She raised the key and approached a large, rusted chest tucked into the corner. The whispers grew frantic, overlapping into a shrill crescendo. Her hands shook as she inserted the key. The lock clicked and the chest creaked open, revealing a collection of objects that radiated darkness: an old locket, a diary filled with frantic handwriting, and a small, ornate mirror. Emma picked up the mirror. As she gazed into it, her reflection warped, morphing into the faces of those who had vanished over the decades. They were trapped in the glass, their expressions twisted with fear. A sudden understanding hit her. The mirror was the source of the Overlook's power, the anchor keeping the spirits imprisoned. Destroying it might be her only chance. She hurled the mirror against the stone wall. It shattered with a deafening crash, shards scattering across the floor. A violent wind erupted, sweeping through the chamber, lifting dust, papers, and debris into a tornado of chaos. The whispers turned into screams, the piano's notes clashing with the howling wind. Emma barely kept her footing. From the shadows, the tall, indistinct figure appeared again. Its eyes glowed brighter, furious, but as the mirror shattered, its form wavered. The child from before stepped forward, reaching out toward the figure. With a scream that seemed to ripple through the entire building, the shadow dissolved into a cloud of darkness, and the oppressive weight in the air lifted slightly. Emma didn't wait to see what else might emerge. She scrambled up the basement stairs, her body shaking from exhaustion and adrenaline. The hotel seemed to resist her ascent. Hallways twisted unnaturally, doors slammed shut, but the key in her pocket glowed faintly, guiding her through the shifting maze. Finally, she burst through the main lobby doors into the snowy night. Cold air rushed in, biting her face, and the wind carried the faintest echoes of the Overlook's lament. The hotel loomed behind her, dark and silent once more, but something had changed. The energy that had hung so heavily over the place seemed diminished, restrained, but not gone. Emma ran down the mountain road, the wind whipping her hair, adrenaline propelling her forward. Behind her, the Overlook Hotel sat in silence, as if sleeping, waiting for the next curious soul to wander inside. By the time she reached her car, dawn was breaking over the Rockies. The first rays of sunlight painted the snowy peaks in gold and pink. Emma sat behind the wheel, breathing heavily, camera still in her lap. She glanced at the recordings, images of shadows, of flickering lights, of the child and the dissolving figure, confirming what she had endured. She knew one thing: the Overlook Hotel's story would make headlines, but she also understood its warning. Some places were not meant to be explored. Some secrets were meant to remain hidden. Emma started the car and drove away, never looking back. But as the miles stretched between her and the Overlook, she felt a lingering chill, the faintest echo of a child's hollow eyes in her mind, reminding her that the hotel's darkness could never be fully escaped. And somewhere, deep in the Colorado Rockies, the Overlook waited, patient, alive, and eternal.